What would you do if a 800-pound grizzly bear came charging straight at you in the wilderness? Most people would run for their lives. But what happened when wildlife rescuer Marcus Thompson encountered this exact scenario after 5 long years will completely shatter everything you think you know about the bond between humans and one of nature's most fearsome predators. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. The story I'm about to share with you defies everything we've been taught about wild animals. It's a tale that will make you question the invisible barriers we place between the human world and the natural kingdom. So settle in, because this journey through the Alaskan wilderness will take you on an emotional roller coaster that ends with a moment so incredible, so utterly impossible, that even the experts couldn't believe their eyes. Our story begins 5 years ago in the remote wilderness of southeastern Alaska, where Marcus Thompson, a 42-year-old wildlife biologist and rescue specialist, was conducting his routine research on salmon migration patterns. Marcus had spent the better part of 2 decades working in some of the world's most dangerous wildlife territories, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover on that crisp September morning. The fog was rolling in thick from the Pacific as Marcus made his way through the dense spruce forest, his boots crunching softly on the carpet of fallen needles. The air carried that distinctive scent of autumn in Alaska, a mixture of salt from the nearby ocean, decaying leaves, and that wild, untamed smell that only exists in places where humans rarely tread. He was focused on reaching a particular tributary where the salmon run had been unusually active, completely unaware that this day would forever change his understanding of what it means to connect with a wild creature. It was the whimpering that stopped him dead in his tracks. At first, Marcus thought it might be an injured dog. The sound was so distinctly distressed, so heart-wrenchingly pitiful, that it cut through the morning silence like a knife. But as he followed the sound deeper into a rocky outcropping near the riverbank, what he discovered made his blood run cold. There, trapped in what appeared to be an abandoned hunting snare that had been cruelly modified with barbed wire, was a grizzly bear cub. But this wasn't just any cub. This little guy couldn't have been more than 4 months old, probably weighing no more than 30 pounds, with fur so dark it was almost black except for the distinctive grizzled tips that gave his species its name. His left hind leg was caught in the wire trap, and the struggle to free himself had only made the situation worse. The wire had cut deep into his leg, and infection was clearly setting in. Marcus's heart sunk as he took in the full scope of the situation. The cub was severely dehydrated, his small body trembling, not just from pain, but from days, maybe even weeks, of being unable to reach water or food. His dark eyes, usually bright and curious in healthy bear cubs, were clouded with exhaustion and fear. But what broke Marcus's heart the most was the silence. This little one had cried himself hoarse. The experienced wildlife rescuer immediately understood the gravity of what he was witnessing. Bear cubs don't survive long without their mothers, especially when injured. And the cruel reality was that the mother was nowhere to be seen. Whether she had been killed by hunters, had abandoned her cub due to the human scent from the trap, or had met some other tragic fate, the result was the same. This little one was completely alone in a world that offered no mercy to the weak or injured. Marcus knew the protocol. Wildlife regulations were clear about human intervention with wild animals, especially predators like grizzly bears. The natural way would be to let nature take its course. But as he looked into those dark, pleading eyes, protocol became meaningless. This wasn't about regulations or proper procedure. This was about a living creature in desperate need of help. What happened next required every ounce of Marcus's 20 years of experience and nerves of steel. Approaching an injured wild animal, even a cub, is incredibly dangerous under normal circumstances. Bears, even young ones, have powerful claws and teeth designed for survival. When they're scared, hurt, and trapped, they become even more unpredictable. But Marcus had something that set him apart from other wildlife workers, an almost supernatural ability to communicate with animals through body language, tone, and what he called energy reading. He spent nearly an hour just sitting 10 feet away from the trapped cub, speaking in low, soothing tones, letting the little bear become accustomed to his presence. "Hey there, little guy. I know you're scared. I know everything hurts right now, but I'm here to help you, okay? Just give me a chance." The cub's initial response was exactly what you'd expect: fear, aggression, attempts to back away despite the excruciating pain it must have caused his trapped leg. But gradually, something remarkable began to happen. The little bear's breathing started to slow. His posture, while still defensive, became less rigid, and those dark eyes began to focus on Marcus with what could only be described as cautious curiosity. The actual rescue was a painstaking process that took over 3 hours. Marcus had to carefully cut through multiple layers of wire while keeping the cub calm and still. Every snip of the wire cutters caused the little bear to tense up, but somehow, incredibly, he seemed to understand that Marcus was trying to help him. There were moments when the cub would actually extend his trapped leg towards Marcus, as if offering it for treatment. When the last piece of wire finally fell away, the cub collapsed with exhaustion. His leg was in terrible condition, infected, swollen, and bleeding. Marcus knew that without immediate medical attention, infection would set in and the cub wouldn't survive another week in the wild. This is where Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't take the cub to a zoo or wildlife facility. The little guy was too young and too traumatized. He needed constant care, medical treatment, and most importantly, he needed to learn how to be a wild bear. Marcus made the unprecedented decision to become this cub's surrogate family. He named him Coda. Coda is the Alaska Native word for friend, and what followed was one of the most intensive wildlife rehabilitation efforts ever undertaken by a single individual. For the next 8 months, Marcus essentially lived in the wilderness with Coda, teaching him everything a mother bear would teach her cub: how to fish, how to identify edible plants, how to detect danger, and perhaps most importantly, how to be afraid of humans. Yes, you heard that right. Marcus spent months teaching Coda to be afraid of people, because that fear would keep him safe in the wild. It was heartbreaking work, building a bond with this incredible creature while simultaneously preparing him for a life where that bond could never exist safely. The medical recovery alone was a miracle. Coda's leg healed completely, thanks to daily treatments and the kind of dedicated care usually reserved for human patients. But the emotional healing was even more remarkable. This cub, who had been dying alone and terrified, transformed into a playful, confident young bear under Marcus's care. By the following spring, Coda had grown into a magnificent yearling bear, weighing nearly 150 pounds and possessing all the skills necessary for survival in the wild. The day of Coda's release was one of the most emotionally challenging moments of Marcus's career. They had chosen a remote area of Glacier Bay National Park, far from human activity but rich with the resources a young bear would need. Marcus had spent weeks gradually reducing his interaction with Coda, preparing both of them for this inevitable separation. On that final morning, Marcus led Coda to the edge of a beautiful meadow overlooking a salmon-rich stream. The spring air was crisp and clean, filled with the scents and sounds that called to something deep in Coda's wild DNA. For a moment, the two friends stood side by side, looking out over the vast wilderness that would become Coda's new home. Then, without ceremony or fanfare, Marcus simply stepped back and said the words he had been rehearsing for weeks. "Go on, buddy. This is your world now." Coda looked back at him one last time, a long, meaningful gaze that seemed to carry the weight of their entire journey together. Then, with the natural grace of his species, he turned and walked into the wilderness. Marcus watched until that familiar dark form disappeared into the forest, carrying with him a piece of Marcus's heart. What followed were 5 long years of silence. Marcus returned to his regular research work, but a part of him remained in that forest with Coda. He would occasionally receive reports from other researchers about a large, healthy grizzly bear in the Glacier Bay area who seemed unusually well adapted to his environment. But he could never be certain it was Coda. Wildlife experts had warned Marcus that he might never see Coda again, and that if he did, the bear might not remember him, or worse, might view him as a threat. Bears released back into the wild typically lose their connection to their human rescuers as their natural instincts take over. It's a necessary adaptation for their survival, but it can be heartbreaking for the humans who saved them. During those 5 years, Marcus threw himself into his work. He rescued dozens of other animals, injured eagles, orphaned wolf pups, sick caribou, but none of them filled the Coda-shaped hole in his heart. He would occasionally dream about their time together in the wilderness, waking with the phantom sensation of a furry head nuzzling his shoulder or the sound of Coda's distinctive huffing laugh when he was content. Colleagues noticed the change in Marcus. He became more solitary, spending longer periods alone in the wilderness. Some wondered if the intensity of his relationship with Coda had somehow broken his ability to connect with other rescue cases. But Marcus knew the truth. Coda hadn't broken him. Coda had shown him what was possible when the barriers between human and animal dissolved completely, and nothing else could ever compare to that profound connection. Then came the day that would change everything once again. Marcus was back in the same area where he had released Coda 5 years earlier, this time tracking wolf populations for a new research project. It was late afternoon in early autumn, and the light filtering through the forest canopy had that golden quality that photographers spend their entire careers trying to capture. He was focused on examining wolf tracks near the stream when he heard it, a sound that made his heart stop. It was a low, rumbling vocalization that he hadn't heard in 5 years, but that was instantly, unmistakably familiar. Marcus froze, hardly daring to breathe, as memories came flooding back with overwhelming intensity. Slowly, he turned around. There, standing about 50 feet away at the edge of the tree line, was a massive grizzly bear. This wasn't a 150-pound yearling he had released 5 years ago. This was a full-grown adult male, probably weighing close to 800 pounds, with a coat that had darkened to a rich chocolate brown, except for those distinctive grizzled tips that caught the afternoon light like gold dust. But it was the eyes that gave him away.
Those same dark, intelligent eyes that had looked at him with trust and gratitude so many years ago. "Coda," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. What happened next defied everything that wildlife experts believe about wild animal behavior. Coda made that same low, rumbling vocalization, a sound Marcus remembered as Coda's expression of contentment and recognition. And then, incredibly, this massive wild grizzly bear began to approach. Every instinct in Marcus's body screamed at him to run, to make noise, to do something to assert his humanity and trigger Coda's natural fear response. But somehow he found himself rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by a mixture of terror and joy that defied rational thought. Coda approached slowly, deliberately, his massive head lowered in a posture that Marcus recognized as non-threatening. When he reached a distance of about 10 feet, close enough to attack, but far enough to retreat if necessary, he stopped. For what felt like an eternity, man and bear simply looked at each other. 5 years of separation, 5 years of wondering, 5 years of missing each other, all compressed into that single electric moment of recognition. Then Coda did something that made Marcus's knees buckle with emotion. He sat down. Just like he used to do as a cub when he wanted attention or comfort, this enormous wild grizzly bear sat down like an oversized dog and made that huffing sound that Marcus had interpreted as laughter all those years ago. What happened next will challenge everything you think you know about the relationship between humans and wild animals. Marcus, operating on pure instinct and 5 years of pent-up emotion, slowly extended his hand toward Coda. Not to touch, he knew better, but as a gesture of recognition, a hello across the species divide. Coda's response was immediate and heartwarming. He leaned forward, and with the delicacy that only those who have worked closely with bears would believe possible, touched his massive nose to Marcus's outstretched fingers. The contact lasted only seconds, but in that brief touch, both man and bear seemed to acknowledge the bond that had never truly been broken. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "I missed you too, buddy." But the truly unbelievable part was still to come. As they sat there in that golden afternoon light, Coda began to exhibit behaviors that Marcus had assumed were lost forever to the wild. He made the same rumbling vocalizations he used to make as a cub when he was happy. He performed a play bow, a behavior typically only seen in young bears or between bears who know each other well. And most incredibly, he began to show Marcus things about his territory, walking a few steps toward the stream and looking back as if to say, "Come see what I've learned." For the next hour, in a moment that seemed suspended outside of normal time, Marcus followed Coda through his territory. The massive bear showed him the best fishing spots, the hidden berry patches, and the comfortable resting areas he had claimed as his own. It was as if Coda was giving Marcus a tour of the life he had built with the skills and confidence Marcus had helped him develop. The wildlife expert in Marcus was astounded. This behavior was unprecedented in documented interactions between humans and rehabilitated wild bears. The emotional human in Marcus was overwhelmed by the realization that their bond had not only survived 5 years of separation, but had evolved into something even more profound, a mutual respect between two beings who had shared one of life's most transformative experiences. But the story gets even more incredible. As Coda led Marcus through his territory, they encountered something that made Marcus's heart swell with pride and wonder. In a small clearing near the stream, playing and tumbling together, were 2 smaller bears, Coda's own cubs. Coda had not only survived and thrived in the wild, He had found a mate and started a family. The skills Marcus had taught him, the confidence he had instilled in him, had enabled Coda to become exactly what nature intended, a successful breeding wild grizzly bear.
In that moment, Marcus realized he was witnessing something that might never happen again in the history of human-wildlife interaction. He was being introduced to a wild bear family by the patriarch, a bear he had saved, raised, and released back to the wild. It was as if Coda was showing him, "Look what you made possible. Look at the life you gave me." As the sun began to set and the forest prepared for evening, Marcus knew it was time to leave. This magical reunion, as profound as it had been, couldn't last. Coda belonged to the wild now, with responsibilities to his mate and cubs that Marcus could never be part of. The goodbye was different this time. There was no sadness, no sense of loss. Instead, there was completion, fulfillment, and a deep sense of rightness about the world. Marcus had saved Coda, but Coda had given him something infinitely more valuable, proof that love and compassion can transcend species, that the bonds we form with other living beings have a power that extends far beyond our understanding. As Marcus began to walk away, Coda followed him to the edge of his territory, the same respectful distance he had maintained throughout their reunion. At the boundary between Coda's world and Marcus's world, they stopped for one final moment together. This time, it was Coda who initiated the farewell. He approached Marcus one last time, and with that same incredible gentleness, touched his nose to Marcus's hand. Then he turned and walked back toward his family, toward his life, toward the wild future that Marcus had made possible. Marcus stood at the edge of the forest until long after Coda had disappeared from sight, his heart full of a joy so complete it felt like it might burst from his chest. He had wondered for 5 years if he had made the right choice in saving that trapped cub. Now he knew with absolute certainty that sometimes taking a risk on love and compassion can create ripples of goodness that extend far beyond what we can imagine. The story of Marcus and Coda has become legendary in wildlife rescue circles, challenging long-held beliefs about the possibility of maintaining emotional connections with rehabilitated wild animals. Wildlife experts who have studied the case note several unprecedented aspects of their reunion. First, Coda's recognition of Marcus after 5 years suggests that the emotional bonds formed during intensive rehabilitation may be far more durable than previously believed. Most experts assumed that wild instincts would completely override any memory of human caretakers, but Coda's behavior suggests otherwise. Second, the fact that Coda chose to introduce Marcus to his family indicates a level of trust and communication that challenges our understanding of bear cognition and social behavior. This wasn't just recognition, it was an active choice to share his most important relationships with someone from his past. Finally, the gentle, non-threatening nature of all interactions during the reunion suggests that Coda retained a sophisticated understanding of Marcus as a non-threatening human, while still maintaining appropriate wariness toward other humans. This selective recognition has implications for how we think about animal memory and emotional intelligence. Marcus has since become an advocate for compassionate wildlife rehabilitation, speaking at conferences around the world about the importance of treating rescued animals not just as biological specimens, but as individuals capable of profound emotional connections. His work has influenced policy changes in several countries, leading to more flexible approaches to wildlife rehabilitation that consider the emotional well-being of both animals and their human caretakers. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is how it has continued to unfold.
Marcus has returned to the area several times over the past 2 years, and while he has never again had direct contact with Coda, he has observed from a distance as Coda's family has grown and thrived. The cubs Coda introduced him to are now juveniles themselves, displaying the same confidence and adaptability that their father learned during his time with Marcus. Local wildlife managers have noted that this particular bear family seems unusually successful, occupying prime territory and raising healthy offspring year after year. While they can't prove a direct connection, many believe that the skills and confidence Coda gained during his rehabilitation have been passed down to their offspring, creating a legacy of successful wild bears who trace their lineage back to that miraculous rescue 5 years ago. Marcus has also established a wildlife rehabilitation program based on his experience with Coda, focusing on intensive, individualized care that recognizes the emotional needs of rescued animals alongside their physical needs. The program has achieved remarkable success rates, with over 90% of rehabilitated animals successfully returning to and thriving in the wild. In a world that often feels divided between human needs and environmental conservation, the story of Marcus and Coda offers a different vision, one where compassion and respect can create bridges between species that benefit everyone. It suggests that when we approach wildlife not as objects to be managed, but as individuals deserving of care and respect, we open possibilities for connection that can transform both human and animal lives. The story also challenges us to reconsider what we mean by wild and natural. Coda's success in the wild wasn't diminished by his time with Marcus, it was enhanced by it. The love and care he received during his rehabilitation didn't make him less of a wild bear, it made him a more successful wild bear. This suggests that human intervention in wildlife situations doesn't have to be seen as contamination of the natural world, but can be a form of healing and restoration that honors the intrinsic value of individual animal lives. Today, Marcus continues his work as a wildlife biologist and rehabilitation specialist, but his approach has been forever changed by his relationship with Coda. He speaks of animals not as subjects of study, but as individuals with their own personalities, emotions, and capacity for forming meaningful relationships. His research has contributed to a growing body of scientific literature that recognizes the emotional complexity of wild animals and the importance of considering their psychological well-being in conservation efforts. The clearing where Marcus first encountered the trapped Coda has been designated as a protected wildlife viewing area, and while very few people are allowed access, those who are granted permission often report a sense of profound peace and connection to the natural world. Rangers say that bears in the area seem unusually tolerant of respectful human presence, as if Coda's positive experience with humans has somehow influenced the local bear culture. Marcus has written extensively about his experience, not to sensationalize it, but to encourage others in wildlife work to remain open to the unexpected ways that animals can touch and transform human lives. He emphasizes that while his story with Coda is unique, the underlying message is universal. When we approach other living beings with genuine compassion and respect, we create possibilities for connection that can heal both parties in ways we never imagined. As we reach the end of this incredible story, it's important to recognize that while few of us will have the opportunity to rescue and rehabilitate a grizzly bear, all of us can apply the lessons of Marcus and Coda's relationship to our own interactions with the natural world.
Their story reminds us that every animal we encounter, from the birds in our backyards to the wildlife we might glimpse during outdoor adventures, is an individual with their own personality, needs, and capacity for forming connections. When we approach them with the same respect and compassion that Marcus showed to Coda, we open ourselves to experiences that can profoundly enrich our lives. We can support wildlife rehabilitation efforts in our own communities, Volunteer with local animal rescue organizations, or simply make more conscious choices about how we interact with the natural world around us. We can advocate for policies that prioritize the welfare of individual animals alongside broader conservation goals. And we can share stories like Marcus and Coda's to help others understand that the boundaries between human and animal experience may not be as rigid as we once believed. Most importantly, we can carry the spirit of this story into all our relationships, recognizing that love, patience, and genuine care have the power to create connections that transcend differences and heal wounds we didn't even know existed. The bond between Marcus and Coda proves that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is simply the willingness to see another being's pain and respond with an open heart. In a world that can often feel harsh and disconnected, their story offers hope that compassion really can change everything. Not just for the individuals involved, but for entire communities, ecosystems, and generations yet to come. When Marcus first heard that pitiful whimpering in the Alaskan forest 5 years ago, he had no idea that responding to one small creature's cry for help would create ripples of healing that continue to spread outward today. But that's the beautiful mystery of compassion. We never know how far its influence will reach, or how many lives it will touch. The next time you encounter a creature in need, whether it's a stray cat, an injured bird, or even a fellow human being who could use a kind word, remember Marcus and Coda. Remember that in that moment of choice between walking away and stepping forward to help, you might just be creating your own miracle. You might just be starting a story of connection and healing that will outlast your lifetime and inspire others to choose compassion over indifference. Because in the end, that's what Marcus and Coda's story really teaches us. That love, once given freely and received gratefully, creates bonds that time cannot break and distances cannot diminish. It reminds us that we are all connected in ways we rarely stop to consider, and that sometimes the most profound relationships can form between the most unlikely companions. So as you go forward from this story, carry with you the image of a man and a bear, separated by species and circumstance, but united by a bond that proved stronger than every force that tried to divide them. Let their story remind you that in a world that often emphasizes our differences, our capacity for connection, for love, remains our greatest strength and our greatest hope for the future. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of the connections between humans and animals. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of compassion. And let us know in the comments about your own experiences with wildlife or rescued animals. Together, we can spread the message that love and respect for all living beings can create a more beautiful world for everyone.